Apparently we're ending the show. Oops. I don't know how many times I need to mess with that thing. It just wants to always activate. It's like, it's time, it's my moment. It's like, no, it's not your moment yet. You've got 2 hours. Little video. Yeah, okay, thanks for coming out. Yeah, right? I don't know what it is with that video. The video clip, for some odd reason, it just constantly wants its moment to shine. I keep trying to teach it. Like, no. I've got to have a button pressed somewhere. All right. Anybody else really shocked that it's already the second month of 2023? Like, quite literally, where did January go? I feel that I got nothing done in January. And then I look back over like all of the stuff that I do, and I realize we got a lot done in January. We got a lot done, but it just doesn't feel like it. For those of you that are regulars, you know that we're running a Kickstarter. Unfortunately, the Kickstarter is, unless some philanthropist comes in and just drops down. I think I learned a lot about doing the Kickstarter. I don't think our projects can be the result of Kickstarter, because by the time I have to add on the padding to cover taxes and stuff, I don't think that at this junction that's going to work. Maybe later in the future. Other than that, been busy, but we're gonna jump right in. This is gonna be a non-specific target show today. Instead, today we're gonna be taking a look at headlines, and I think this is important to do from time to time. I used to do this. Excuse me. I used to do this with my students periodically. Like if we took a test on a Thursday, wouldn't necessarily start a new chapter on Friday. We take a look at the headlines. First and foremost, it was really odd to me. Everybody's talking about, certain things. This is CNN right now. Suspected Chinese spy balloon could exit the US today. This has been like everybody's top headline, right? Everyone's top headline. This thing is huge. This thing is like the size of 3 city buses. It's unreal. Why the US hasn't shut down the balloon? You know what? Let's find out why the US hasn't shut down the balloon. Why the US hasn't shut down the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon, according to officials. As the US and its Canadian partners continue to monitor a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon floating above the northern United States, one question stands out: why hasn't it been shot down? The balloon's path carries it over a number of sensitive sites. The balloon, which is the size of 3 buses, has been seen over Montana, which is home to the underground US military intercontinental ballistic missile silos. U.S. Northern Command is coordinating with NASA to determine the debris field if the balloon were to be shot down. But so far, officials have determined that the potential damage of falling debris outweighs the risk of the balloon itself, which they say does not have the ability to bring in more intelligence than spy satellites in low Earth orbit, which China already uses. Why not shoot it down? We have to do the risk-reward here. So the first question is, does it pose a threat, a physical kinetic threat to individuals in the United States and the U.S. homeland? Our assessment is it does not. Okay, well, I'm just going to be silly here based on what you've said. If your risk analysis is that the debris field would be the risk not worth the reward, then what if they decided to detonate it and chop, right? Chop. Number 2, why not capture it? I mean, we've got to have a way to bring down a balloon slowly, right? Our best assessment right now, it does not. It does not pose a significant enhanced threat on the intelligence side. So given that profile, we assess the risk of downing it, even if the probability is low in a sparsely populated area of the debris field falling and hurting someone or damaging property, that it wasn't worth it. President Joe Biden was briefed on the balloon's movement and requested options from his military advisors. And while there was a consideration to down the balloon while it was over Montana, the advice was ultimately not to. The Biden administration acted immediately to protect against the collection of sensitive intelligence. Now, just so everybody knows, right? The Chinese spy on America. America spies on the Chinese all the time. We're constantly doing this. We constantly try to gather intelligence on each other. Here's why, for a lot of the people that didn't understand why we didn't shoot it down, here's the reason why we didn't shoot it down. Because it's not really a big deal. At the end of the day, it's not really a big deal. You're sending a surveillance balloon over Montana. Okay? We have nuclear weapons there. Okay? Everybody knows this. This isn't like some trade secret that we like. It's known where our military installations are. It's known where our nuclear bases are. Now, is it known where every single silo is? No. Like, they don't already know the locations. Exactly. And just so everybody is aware, in case people are like, this is a precursor to a Chinese attack on the United States mainland based on what's going on in Taiwan. We're going to look at some Taiwan stories today. I want to remind people that both sides, or all three sides now, have nuclear submarines. Not nuclear submarines run on nuclear power. They have nuclear submarines that have nuclear weapons as part of their manifest. Even if you were to somehow take out all 100% of all of the US nuclear silos and 100% of all of the US strategic bombers, the Navy has subs on alert all the time. So when people are like, this is a precursor to a nuclear war, no, it's not, because you don't win the nuclear war by destroying the other people's nuclear weapons. You win the nuclear war by destroying the other people's people. It's still a goofy thing to not have shot down, but I understand the let's not do a knee-jerk reaction. Let's recognize that this thing really at the end of the day isn't a threat. It's not going to let the Chinese know anything that's not available with, like, you know, a long Google search. And if you think I'm kidding about that, you can do a long Google search and you can find all sorts of information. You guys noticed that War Thunder game that somebody just leaked classified military intelligence to prove a point in the game about the turret speed wasn't rotating the right speed. So people are weird, but people have access to all sorts of stuff. New U.S. aid package includes longer range bombs for the Ukraine. The only reason to shoot it down is to make a point or set the precedent. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. I don't disagree with that point. They should have shot it down to prove the point. You don't send your garbage over our country. I don't disagree with you on that one. The new U.S. aid package includes longer range bombs for the Ukraine. The weapon, the ground-launched small-diameter bomb, is made up of a precision-guided 250-pound bomb strapped to a rocket motor and fired from a ground launcher. It was interesting because I've never heard of this particular capability. I've heard of most. I never heard of this I didn't know we had this capability. The Biden administration is providing the Ukraine with a new longer-range bomb as part of a $2.2 billion aid package announced Friday, but the new weapon likely won't arrive until much later this year. The weapon, the ground-launched small-diameter bomb, is made up of a precision-guided 250-pound bomb strapped to a rocket motor and fired from a ground launcher. It's normally launched from the air, and the ground-launched version does not yet exist in the U.S. military inventory. It could take up to 9 months for U.S. defense contractors to do the necessary retrofits. So, there is a question, but isn't that a missile? Yes. Yes, it is. Okay, at the end of the day, yes. That is a missile. Bombs travel to their target through the use of gravity alone. These aren't going to be traveling through the use of gravity alone. These are being launched by a missile, and they're precision guided. So yeah. So we're giving them a bomb they can't use. Yeah, we're promising them a weapon that they can't use for 9 months. This is where ex-military I am, but this is pork. This is pork at its finest. It could take up to 9 months for U.S. defense contractors to do the necessary retrofits. That's money. That's money right there. So we're going to say that we have a $2.2 billion aid package to the Ukraine, but they're not getting $2.2 billion. U.S. defense contractors are getting a cut. The rest of the aid package includes weapons drawn from the U.S. stocks, as well as funding to contract new equipment through the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, a vehicle set up by Congress to fund aid for Ukraine. The package includes spare parts and munitions for air defense systems, a critical need in blunting the Russian drone and missile attacks on civilian targets across the Ukraine. Russian forces have moved some of their most sensitive command and control centers out of range of Ukraine's current rockets, frustrating military commanders who have asked for longer range munitions to stay on the offensive. Specifically, they've asked for the U.S.-made Army tactical missile systems that has a range of about 190 miles. But the Biden administration has said the weapon is out of the question, citing concerns the Ukraine would use them to attack targets inside Russia. Okay. So, again, you're going to give them a longer ranged bomb, a precision guided 250-pound bomb strapped to a rocket motor and fired from a ground launcher. And you're going to give them that. But you're not going to give them a weapon that has a range of 190 miles because they might attack targets inside Russia. A concern that's specifically what they said they want to use them for. Right. The new rockets announced on Friday, which can travel over 80 miles, will help. Okay. Does anybody else have to laugh at this? Just these decisions? We're giving them 250-pound bombs that can only travel 80 miles. So if it can only travel 80 miles, then I'm sure you smart people could figure out rocket plus thrust plus height plus elevation plus the pull of gravity. These things aren't going to be getting very high up in the air, because the higher up in the air it goes, the farther it can go due to gravity. I think this is going to be a giant goat rope. Will help Ukrainian forces conduct operations in defense of their country, to take back their sovereign territory in Russian-occupied areas. So I have a question. What happens when they get within 1 mile of the Russian border then? Don't they now have a weapon that they can fire 79 miles into Russia? They will not be drawn from existing American stockpiles, however, meaning it will take months for Boeing and the U.S. government to agree on the terms of the contract and get them to the battlefield. Another issue is that the bomb can't be launched by any of Ukraine's current equipment. Ukrainian engineers have been working on retrofits for ground launchers for several months. Much to the disappointment of some in Kiev, the last few trenches of aid have not included the weapon. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead to a foreign news piece, which talks about the other part here. Cool your jets. Why the West is making the Ukraine wait for fighter planes. Does anybody else feel that instead of monkeying around with a 250-pound bomb that can go 80 miles, 90 miles, and we have to build ground-based equipment for it, we could just give them jets? If we gave them a handful of jets, wouldn't they be able to solidify their border? It's a no on jets for now. The West isn't really saying never on fighter jets. It just wants to focus first on giving Kiev weapons for a looming offensive. Now, I know that I'm not a top-level strategist, but I'm pretty certain that in all of the years of being in the military, I heard air supremacy and air superiority. I'm pretty certain that our ground wars since the invention of the Air Force have always been predicated on, do we have air superiority? Do we have air supremacy? The sentiment emerging in the wake of U.S. President's blunt no echoed to various degrees by leaders in Germany and the UK to the question of whether he would be sending Ukraine fighter jets it is requesting. While officials have publicly remained unequivocally that no jets are forthcoming, private discussions indicate that it may be just a matter of time. We could, but that would be sending too much of a message. Pretty sure that's a major pillar of having the Air Force. Just guessing though, right? The reason why we won't send a bunch of ground troops into an area that we don't have air supremacy in is because fighter jets and bombers are an amazing way to break offensives. They have 5,000 troops headed this way. We have 10 daisy cutters headed that way. Assuming they have the time and money, then you got to train the pilots. We don't have to train the pilots. They have pilots. They have pilots. They don't have jets. They have a functional they had a functional air force, and Russia took it out. They have pilots. They just have no tails. They have no hardware. At the Pentagon, senior U.S. officials acknowledge Ukraine will need to modernize its aging air force with newer fighter jets. But for now, officials are focused on sending the weapons Kiev needs for the immediate fight. The same conversations are happening in Europe. Countries like Poland, the Netherlands, and France have indicated an openness to the idea, but officials stress there's considerable work to be done just to get Ukraine the taboo-shattering weapons promised in recent weeks. The possibility of sending Ukraine fighter jets stretches back to the war's early days. In the weeks after Russia sent troops streaming across the border, the Polish government claimed it was ready to transfer Soviet air fighter planes to the U.S. so they could go to Ukraine pilots. So, an early blitz on Kiev has morphed into trench warfare, a war that may last days or weeks. Now, a war that may last days or weeks now could linger for years. Western allies have blown through one red line after another: heavy weaponry, howitzers, long-range rocket systems, armored vehicles, all eventually making their way to the Ukraine. And finally, in a watershed moment last month, allies joined together to pledge roughly 80 modern Western-made tanks. Yeah, and what is the range of these jets? We're concerned about sending missiles with over 80-mile range, but sending jets is a discussion. See, grumpy old man is a grumpy old man, but he's been around the block a few times, and he understands that these conversations are completely asinine. We don't want to give you a missile system, a ground missile system with a range of 200 miles. Well, I hate to tell you that once you put a fighter jet in the air and it has bombs on it, it has a much longer range than 80 miles. It can get the job done. But this is why I don't like modern news, because modern news will be political over some things, but it takes a handful of people on a Twitch show on a Saturday morning to just poke holes in these arguments. We've given them artillery. Guess what happens? That artillery doesn't stop working when they reach the end of the edge of the border. What if the Ukraine decides that when we give them 80 modern tanks and they completely decimate Russia's mechanized? And what do we do when President Zelensky decides to take back everything that Russia seized? And I don't mean in this war. What do we do if President Zelensky decides, with all the information or all the technology we give him, he's going to retake the Crimea? We've got a remote control button where we can turn them off, yeah? Well, I don't know. I mean, some stuff, yes. Some stuff we can remote deactivate. But what do we do if President Zelensky says, okay, now I've got these Leopard 2 tanks and I'm going to just, you know, take back. What are you going to do if he decides to get to the Russian border and push it back 10 miles to create a DMZ? I mean, everything we've seen is that the Ukraine, as long as they can continue to hold, they're going to win. Russia has pushed multiple times and can't get the job done. So, yeah, which would be totally reasonable. And then what would happen? President Zelensky pushes Russia back 10 miles and claims that as a DMZ. Russia would throw a fit, demand. See, here's where I see the problem. Russia, as a member of the Security Council, the moment the Ukraine invades Russia, which we all know that's happening, can we all agree it's February 4th, 2023? Can we all agree the Ukraine is going to invade Russia? They're going to go on a counteroffensive and get some back? Can we all agree on that? Because I'm going to agree on that. As soon as the first Ukrainian boot crosses over the border, Russia's going to start screaming to the UN that a UN nation is attacking a UN nation. And you know they're going to do it. This one I thought was funny. Orban is telling Ukraine to quit. Just as Western allies give Ukraine tanks, Hungary is going in the opposite direction, arguing Russia will prevail. As Ukrainian flags fly across European capitals and Western tanks come to the Ukraine's rescue, Hungary's prime minister is openly questioning Ukraine's viability as a sovereign state. In Budapest, his government has lined the streets with anti-sanction billboards. The Hungarian State Opera is staging a production of Sergei Prokofie's War and Peace. Prokovev's. My question for you is this: Are you serious, Hungary? Are you really serious right now? Are you really serious? You're questioning their viability as a sovereign state. I'm pretty sure they were doing okay as a sovereign state before Russia invaded them. I'm pretty sure they were doing good as a sovereign state for the last year while they're racking up dubs and handing Russia big L's. It's Afghanistan now, Orban said during a roundtable discussion. Vladimir Putin will not lose, and time is on Russia's side, he argued, calling Ukraine the land of nobody. Are you serious? You're comparing the Ukraine to Afghanistan. Have you done any history on Afghanistan, Mr. Prime Minister? Because if you'd done any history on Afghanistan, you would know calling Ukraine Afghanistan is one of the greatest compliments you could give the Ukraine. Because if you know your history, who sent Russia packing? Was that Afghanistan? The Mujahideen, I'm trying to get the dates. Russia invaded Afghanistan in 1979. 9 years, 1 month, 3 weeks, and 1 day later, the Mujahideen forced the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, which then resulted in the Afghan Civil War. This is, remember we did a show a while ago and we talked about politicians versus statesmen. We talked about people that just say things and they either had somebody else write it. Calling the Ukraine Afghanistan is the greatest compliment you could call the Ukraine. And I don't, and this is this guy literally he backhandedly insulted Russia because Russia lost in Afghanistan. Russia lost in Afghanistan. It took them almost a decade and they lost. They lost to people who literally, people always talk about, in America, why do we have the right to bear arms? You're talking about, it's the second instance of when it's the second instance of when an armed populace without military hardware has been able to defeat a military power with tanks and planes. Yeah, basically they're saying we're not going to win in Ukraine from a Russian perspective. Exactly. And this guy probably, you know, said that, and then somebody probably told him the history of Afghanistan, and he was like, oh, I screwed up. It's a message almost diametrically opposed to the rhetoric flying around the rest of the Western Alliance, which just last week pieced together another red line when it pledged to give Ukraine dozens of modern tanks, and its heightening tensions between Hungary and neighboring Ukraine. Orban's remarks sparked outrage among Ukrainian officials who said they would summon Hungary's ambassador. Back in Budapest, Orban's approach is seen as partially a domestic political ploy to distract from Hungary's economic woes as a nod to nationalist voters. But there's also a sense among experts that Orban's rhetoric is about more than just short-term politicking. The Hungarian leader, they say, wants to preserve his long-standing relationship with the Kremlin. Well, of course, because you have to look at that region of the world. You have to look at that region of the world and see who's around, because for those of you that aren't really familiar with that region of the world, you got Russia, right? You got Russia, you got Belarus on top. I don't think a lot of people understand that Ukraine doesn't have their flanks secured. The Ukraine doesn't have, the only part of the Ukraine that is secure is Poland and Slovakia over there on the left, right? You got Poland back here, you got Slovakia. You don't necessarily want Hungary. For all you know, Russia's going to invade you from Hungary. Hungary is going to get involved. This is why when people are like, I don't understand why the Ukraine is so vulnerable, because Russia is sending troops across the border. Belarus sending troops across the border. Look at that. That's like almost all of their shared border. So they can't just pull everything out of Western Ukraine. They have stuff in Western Ukraine that they want to use on the Eastern Front, but they can't because Belarus is keeping that stuff pinned in. If you have a threat of a northern invasion, then you can't move stuff away. So it's, it's just not a good situation for the Ukraine to be in. Look, simply put, you share a border with one of the world's superpowers. It's a good thing not to completely piss them off. So that is why Hungary is kind of posturing. Yeah, I mean, Hungary is trying to make sure that at the end of the thing, they're seen as a pet, not cattle. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, read back over. So Germany is sending 88 tanks to the Ukraine, version 1, the version 1 tanks. Berlin's OK German arms maker plans to sell dozens of the older versions to Kiev. The German government has approved the delivery by a private arms maker of its old tanks to Kiev. I can confirm that an export license has been issued for Leopard 1 tanks, a government spokesperson said. Early on Friday, they reported Berlin had approved the German maker's plan to sell 88 of the tanks for a total cost of more than 100 million. The move further signals a reversal of Berlin's policy on tanks for the Ukraine, 9 days after the Chancellery announced it would send one company of version 2 tanks as part of a European coalition. Yes, this risks creating supply bottlenecks because Leopard 1s are no longer produced and their shells have a different caliber than the newer 2 version. The German government is also considering buying 15 Gepard tanks it sold to Qatar, but might face some issues there since ammunition for these is made in Switzerland, which has so far refused to approve re-exports to Ukraine on the grounds it would breach its neutrality. Yeah, they're old, but don't they still have predictive computer aiming? No. My understanding is the version 1 has analog targeting, and I believe analog targeting in the targeting suite is only for the gunner. The version 2 is like our Abrams version 2, where the targeting is upgraded to digital, predictive, and both the driver and the commander have it, or the gunner and well, don't want to get into tanks because you'd have to do a lot of teaching and training, but it's the upgraded versions are digital, and both the commander and the driver have the digital suite. The major problem with this is Ukraine said they need 200 to 500 tanks total. Then the next day it's like we need 250 to 500 fighter planes. When will it stop? Russia knows this is a proxy war. It's NATO versus Russia. But through the Ukraine, eventually Russia will be backed into a corner and will have no choice but to retaliate. It's not a matter of why or how. It's a matter of when. Well, here, I think, Flame, that you're missing a really big important point. Yes, when you're in war, one day it's I need this, and the next day it's I need that, and the third day it's I need the other. Today I need bullets because I don't have bullets to fight the war. Tomorrow I need band-aids to put my people back together. The next day I need beans to feed my people. The next day I need blankets to keep my people warm. That's war. That's logistics in war. You always need something today, and you're always going to need something tomorrow. That's why it's bullets, beans, blankets, and band-aids. It's the 4 B's of war. Am I shipping you stuff to fight the war? Am I shipping you stuff to save lives? Am I shipping you stuff to feed people? Or am I shipping you stuff to keep them alive? And then you say Russia will be backed into a corner. I have no choice but to retaliate. And then Grumpy Old Man says retaliate. Who invaded who? See, this is the problem that mainstream media, right? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Ukraine is wrong, but Russia did invade or at fault no matter what. I'm saying eventually Russia won't put up with this supplying. And what's Russia going to do exactly? See, this is where everybody says eventually Russia won't tolerate. And I say, okay, what will Russia do? Well, they don't have much choice. What do you mean they don't have much choice? See, what you're doing is you've been brainwashed by the mainstream media with all their fear-mongering and, oh, we have to let Russia do this. It's either go big or surrender. Or, I don't know, surrender? I don't know, cessation of hostilities? Because if Russia announced that they were withdrawing back over their border, then the Ukraine would not legally be allowed to fire at them while they were withdrawing. And then Russia will get some sanctions. Russia will have to pay some reparations, and it's over. But when people say stuff like Russia will have to retaliate, the big issue is Russia will never give up Donbass and Crimea, and nobody's saying who says that they have to give up the previously taken areas if they withdraw and they cease hostilities. See, the problem is this is an example of Russia thought they were going to gobble up another piece of the Ukraine, and it didn't work. And now, that's what the president of Ukraine said is their ultimate goal. The president of the Ukraine said that's his ultimate goal because if he says that's his ultimate goal and Russia withdraws, he doesn't get that goal. To drive Russia out of their lands. But remember, right now the Crimea isn't Ukrainian land. See, you got to look at this from more than just what the news people are telling you in isolated quotes. If Russia was to end the war today and withdraw back over their borders, that would be it. It'd be over. Russia would not lose Crimea because they couldn't. Because Crimea is considered part of Russia. They held a referendum that nobody believes was real, but it was still held. They also state their goals as much higher than what they want in order to be able to back down at the negotiation table. What about Donbass? Donbass is part of the Ukraine. Donbass doesn't go to Russia. It's not a question right now of what happens with Donbass. Donbass is the Ukraine. Russia would have to withdraw to within the officially recognized borders. Correct. You cannot surrender or you cannot end facilities. They had a referendum there for parts of that was on the news. Right. But do you know what the results were? And I want to ask you another question. The results were parts of the area want to secede and go to Russia. I want to ask you a question. Does that mean that Texas is a bad example because Texas technically can. Does that mean that California could hold a referendum and join Canada? Does that mean anything? Could California say we want to join could California say we want to join Canada? No. They can't. You can hold whatever referendum you want, but part of a country isn't allowed to just say, you know what? We want to leave. It's like this one. A lot of people, they don't know their US geography. Here's a map of the United States. Okay? Map of the United States, and we're gonna look at this part right here. This is our northern border, right? We've got our northern border here. This is the top of North Dakota. This is the top of Maine. And look how much of Canada. No, they couldn't, because territorially they aren't close to Canada. Well, Hawaii isn't close to Canada. And I want to remind you, Alaska isn't close to CONUS. So, but the problem is, what if Ottawa, what if Toronto, what if Montreal, what if Quebec all said, us in our province, Ontario, Quebec, we want to join the United States? No, it was like $18 million or something. Russia sold it to us. 7.2 million. But see, that's the Quebec wants to do that still to this day. Right. New Brunswick. A lot of those places want to leave Canada. Should a group of people be allowed to hold a referendum and then just say, nope, we're changing countries? They want a referendum and leave Canada and join the United States. You're right, they do. I'm still shocked to this day that Southern Ireland has never petitioned the United States to become a state. They're like, we want what you have. But see, that's the problem, where the mainstream media starts to say these things like, oh, well, it's part of the Donbass region. Some of the people that like living in the Donbass region actually want to leave and they want to join Russia. Well, that's great, but they don't get to do that. Those people can get up and leave and go emigrate to Russia. The people can. Unless you had complete 100%, unless you had complete 100% unanimous, then great. Then go over the border and live in Russia. Exactly. In 1967, Quebec had tried that, and Prime Minister of Canada at the time declared martial law and squashed it. Yeah, because he should have. Because that's exactly that's sedition. Now, there's nothing that says a Canadian can't move across the border. A Canadian can absolutely move across the border and come live in America. It's easier for a Canadian to come to America than it is for somebody from South America to come to America. It's racist, but it's what it is, right? Kiev has been pressing allies to send tanks for months, saying it needs hundreds to face a potential Russian counteroffensive. The UK has pledged to send some Challenger 2 tanks, while the US has said it will send 31 M1 Abrams tanks. Those are M1A1 version A1, not version A2. Although I did see some discussion that the US was going to send version 2s as well. Personally, my response is we should be sending them all of our old crap military gear and just get rid of it. We've got stockpiles of it. And then people are like, well, what about the maintenance? Trust me, the US stockpile is in way better shape than the Russian stockpile. What is the point of this war exactly? Well, a long time ago in a land far away, there was the USSR. And the USSR was a massive, group of countries, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which was basically a cute and clever way to say you're our pawns in the Cold War. And what happens is the Ukraine is actually one of the few countries that there's a lot of value in. I believe 80% of the world's 70% of the world's neon gas and 40% of the krypton supply and 90% of the semiconductor grade neon 90% of highly purified semiconductor grade neon for chip production is done in the Ukraine. 90%. They hold 70% of the world's neon gas. Neon is going to be the next thing that neon's already becoming part of the chip shortage, because noble gas exports have become a problem. But yeah, and the Ukraine also generates a ton of food, and those are two things that Russia desperately needs. Russia needs food, and Russia needs income. It needs profits. So they basically just want to take back a former USSR country, which, you see, this is one of the biggest mistakes that was done in geopolitics years and years and years ago. Ukraine being on the border of Russia should have immediately been brought into NATO. Period. The Ukraine wanted its independence. The Ukraine should have been brought into NATO, and then in eastern Ukraine should have been a military base. Should have been a U.S. military base. But they didn't do that. And so now we've got shenanigans all over the place. I thought this one was kind of like, interesting. The Ukraine boycott threat looms over Paris 2024 Olympics. The International Olympic Committee wants to reintegrate Russian and Belarusian athletes as neutrals. The IOC has chastised the Baltic states for threatening to boycott the 2024 games in a row over whether Russian and Belarusian athletes should be allowed to compete. I don't know. I'm just saying that the whole spirit of the Olympics is international cooperation and brotherhood and sisterhood. The row has escalated into an international dispute with Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, calling for a total ban on Russians and Belarusians and raising the threat of a boycott of the Paris Games. Good. They should be boycotting the games. They should. If you're going to let Russia and Belarus, who are currently engaged in an illegal war against the sovereign nation, compete at the Olympics, then everybody else should boycott it. You said they could use Donbass as the buffer zone like they did in North and South Korea. Flame Strike, don't take this personal. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're trying to compare something that had to happen with something that doesn't have to happen. Do you know what the DMZ in South Korea looks like? Yeah, you're trying to learn. But what you're saying is you're trying to take an entire region where people live. You don't turn a place where people live into the DMZ. You take a place where nobody lives and you turn that into the DMZ. The Korean War was lost. North Korea would have won the Korean War. North Korea would have won the Korean War if we didn't sue for peace. They have 1 million soldiers. And let me tell you, in a war against North Korea, North Korea, if they ever decided to invade South Korea, would push south so quickly that the war would be over before the war got started. If North Korea ever sent its army across the border, they've said that Seoul would fall within 72 hours. And they would push so far south that it would be nearly impossible to push them back to North Korea. That's why we have strategic plans in place for basically nullifying any ground movement from North Korea. Will be met with, wait for it, naval and aerial assets that will basically turn anything coming across the border. Don't we have the largest overseas base there? No, we don't. We have chopped. So a long time ago in a land far away, we had somewhere upwards of 30,000 people on the DMZ all the time. Over the years and over the funding, we've downscaled because the way we've changed our response tactics is we don't have to have 30,000 people there as a speed bump, because what are 30,000 people going to do against a 1 million man army? We know North Korea maintains a 1 million man army. So what are 30,000 people going to do? What are 30,000 people going to do against 1 million people washing over them? I mean, sure. Say you take out 5 to 1. Yeah, target practice, but say you take out 5 to 1. So you've taken out 150,000 of their 1 million man army, and they've now swamped you, and they're past you. So now basically we've drawn down to a point where it says it doesn't matter. We can just have we can have one Marine at a base with a flag. And if that Marine gets overrun, then the U.S. is going to respond with the same lethality they would have if we lost 30,000 people. The reason why North Korea doesn't do that is because they know that we will level North Korea behind them. So they'll push down, their 1 million man army will push down, will destroy everything behind them. And then they're basically going to be stuck between the South Korean Defense Force and, scorched earth behind them. They'll have nowhere to withdraw to. That's the only thing that keeps North Korea in line. Now, North Korea becoming a nuclear power is a scary, scary thought, because North Korea isn't going to come to the table like everybody else and say, if we use these weapons. North Korea, as soon as it has nuclear weapons, is going to come to the table and say, we're going to use these weapons. I saw the Chinese Mid-East buildup stirs security worries for the U.S. Chinese state-owned companies are making billions of dollars in investments near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's prime conduits for oil shipments, a move that could lay the groundwork for future military presence. Chinese state-owned firms are building up their presence near the Strait of Hormuz, raising risks of future clash with U.S. interests in one of the world's busiest oil transitways. The growing footprint of Chinese commercial activity in the area, including billions of dollars in investments in oil pipelines and storage, is fueling worries from the U.S. national security hawks, for it could provide Beijing with a dangerous inflow over a major choke point for petroleum shipments. So, while the U.S. is busy running around the whole world trying to fight every fight that they think needs fighting, China has been doing things like this systematically over and over and over again. For those of you that don't know this, there is a long history of the U.S. screwing over the Middle East at every chance we get. So one of the major interesting points or theories behind Middle Eastern government versus American government is in the Middle East, those countries own businesses. In the United States, we don't own things. The government doesn't own things. So the government loses a lot of money on a lot of things. Instead of the government owning the companies that make the bombs and make the weapons and make all that, it's all privatized. Now you can agree with this, you could disagree with this, but there is something to be said about the government owning certain things, because then the profits flow back into the government, and then the government doesn't need to have taxes because the government is making tons and tons and tons of money. Aramco, the Arab American oil company, was put together in this spirit of cooperation between Saudi Arabia and America. And then what happened is, like we always do, American companies... See, I don't know what it is about American companies, but American companies like to screw over their business partners. I think one of the greatest lines in anything for teaching business... No, it was before Bush and the boys. It was long before Bush and the boys. One of the biggest things from the movie Suicide Squad is with the Joker, where the Joker meets one of his street level guys and he says, Jay, you're back, making you a lot of money, making me a lot of money. And then the guy gets killed by the Joker because the Joker doesn't care about what this guy cares about. But the best part of the business example is making you a lot of money, making me a lot of money. It's like the Joker in the Dark Knight. He wanted his half. I want half. Don't worry, I'm only burning my half. Greed is something that drives most people out of business. Remember, I talk about when I help people with their small business plans, and I tell them 21 out of every 100 small businesses fail within the first 12 months. 21 out of every 100 businesses fail within their first 12 months. They're out of business in under a year. That's a pretty high fail rate. Some of it is because of incompetence. Some of it is because the people that are running the business are absolutely incompetent and they can't make it work. Some of it is greed. Some of it is absolutely greed. For example, Elon Musk and Twitter. I feel bad for Elon Musk because he bought a loser. He bought a lemon. I feel bad for Elon Musk because he bought Twitter and Twitter had lied to him, and they did not properly present their income, their expenses, blah blah blah. So he spent $44 billion for a company that was losing $4 million a day. At the same time, appreciate that, Zerg. At the same time, you're talking about a guy who was able to leverage $44 billion in cash to do a cash transaction. So I don't feel that bad for him. And then furthermore, I don't feel bad for him because the way he went about things, like charging $8 for a Twitter checkmark. Now, I do agree that a lot of the things that the execs at Twitter did during that sale were reprehensible. But you also don't get to be the richest man on the planet and cry poor mouth that business-wise you got screwed. Maybe you should have paid people better. I don't agree with Elon Musk and his ideas that he goes in and he fires all the top leadership and then 75% of the staff. I do agree with how he did it. If you're going to do that, then give people 90-day severance. That's a nice gesture. I think the problem is we're talking about greed. We're talking about greed, global greed. There's a line, Al Pacino has a line in The Devil's Advocate, a really, really powerful thing where he's talking about people fist fuck the planet, lick their fingers clean to tote up their billable hours. I think profit taking has gotten to a point where people are just straight greedy. How much can I get? It's like, you guys know, I don't agree with making obscene amount of money. I don't agree with stopping people from making obscene amount of money. But I have always said, if my brands start to get more popular and my brands start to make money, then I will employ people. I will generate more wealth for other people. I know that one streamer doesn't stream on their popular channel because they don't want to make the money. They don't want the responsibility. That's fine. That's their right to do. I wish I was in a position where I could turn off a highly monetized channel, because I wouldn't, because then I'd start employing people. A little bit of this, a little bit of this. Be like, hey, why don't you write some articles on Ashes 101 and I'll pay you for the articles you write? Why don't you do some stuff for me and I'll pay you for what you do? You know, I've always said that if I got into a position where I wanted people to leave their jobs and join my content creation, I would want to be in a position where I could be like, all right, I have enough money to pay you for the next 5 years. And in order to make sure you get paid for the next 5 years, I'm taking this money, I'm putting it into an escrow account, and it's just going to be earmarked for paying you for the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. That way you can leave your job and know you have a job for 10 years. Greed is what causes all of our problems. The United States is worried about China moving into the Middle East and building up all these things. Well, maybe if the United States treated international oil acquisition as a government-run business, then Saudi Arabia, Oman, the United Arab Emirates, they wouldn't need to be looking for Chinese investors, because America would be like, China, we're already here. We got this. We got this. We got it. We're good. We're covered. But no, we allow laissez-faire economics. We go hands off with how our countries do their business in foreign countries. For example, Nike has facilities all around the world where people are making jerseys and shoes and shorts with their teeth, breaking the strings with their teeth. We've done that because it's too expensive for them to pay Americans to make that, but we don't put a massive tariff on that to protect American jobs. Nike as a corporation is importing shoes from China, Malaysia, Taiwan, Africa. Okay. How much are you paying those people in those countries? $1 a day? All right. Well, we're going to impose, how many hours does it take to make a pair of shoes? An hour? Okay, we're going to impose a $30 tariff on your shoes. Why? So that we can put money into the unemployment fund. Because you're not helping generate American jobs, then you can afford to pay a $30 tariff on those shoes. Now, at the end of the day, they would just raise the prices another $35 to cover it. And then guess what? Maybe people stop buying their shoes because they're too expensive. But what we have is we have the money to pay for the people now. Nestle as well, they're ultimate eco-terrorists, and the US doesn't do squat about what Nestle does. Their practice is right, as long as they don't do it in the United States. Which I think is one of the most insulting things as a country. As the world leader in everything that we're supposed to be, we don't fine our companies when they do things that are eco-terrorist things in foreign countries. We don't say to them, you can't behave thusly in foreign countries. You have to behave to the same standards anywhere you are, or we just invalidate your American entity. They do it in California. I know a lot of people, well, the thing is, in California, they get fined when they violate the law. You guys know my position and opinion on environmental law. Environmental law should be a ever doubling fine. If it's a $50,000 fine today and you do it, then tomorrow it's a $100,000 fine. And tomorrow, when it's a $100,000 fine, if you keep doing it, the next day it's a $200,000 fine, and then 4, and then 8, and then, you know, it just is going to keep going up and up and up. Because there was a company in Indiana dumping into a river that led to the Great Lakes that was dumping benzene into the river. And they were told that it was a $50,000 fine every day that they dumped benzene into the river. I'm sorry, a $20,000 fine every day they dumped benzene into the river. And so they figured out what it would cost them to shut down the facility and clean up the benzene problem. And then they figured out what it would cost them over 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And it became a $7.3 million cost of doing business. It was going to take them hundreds of millions to mitigate the benzene problem. So it was just a $20,000 a day cost of doing business. Meanwhile, they're just continuing to dump benzene into the river and into the Great Lakes. Well, that's the problem. That's where laws need to be fixed. But that's where lobbyists, companies that are pollutants, have more lobbyists than the EPA. This is a problem. See, our government, we need a constitutional convention. The president should be able to go to joint sessions of Congress and simply ask for changes to the laws. And as long as he's not trying to spend money, which should have longer bill deliberation, President Joe Biden should be able to walk into Congress right now, today, and say, I need an amendment to XYZ law. XYZ law states that it's a $20,000 a day maximum fine for polluting. However, there is no clause for mandatory remediation. So I'm asking to an amendment to this law that says every day that your company continues to dump pollutants into a river, the fine doubles. That's all I'm not asking for anything else. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for more EPA officers or agencies or buildings or trucks or funding or paper or pens or anything. I just need an amendment to this law. That should be a joint Congress vote. Right then, right there. The president is introducing a bill for a remediation of this law, to an amendment to this law for immediate thing, because the president could do it by executive order. But then Congress is going to spend the next 20 days spun up that the president passed an EO instead of focusing on why the president passed an EO. It's kind of funny that seems to be a recurring trend on my brands. People are so concerned with how and why people are so concerned with how somebody is saying something. They're not focusing on why they're saying what they're saying. Hey, we need to curb this profit taking on eggs. We need to curb this profit taking on eggs. Who is anybody to tell egg farmers that they can't raise their prices right now at a moment where it's time to take profit? Egg farmers are trying to replace 74 million laying hens due to avian flu. But they're being told you can't profit take. Why? See, I don't believe they should profit take, but I believe that they should have been making a fair amount of money on what they're making. But here's why I'm against unions, and I'm going to jump that one in here because it deliberately and specifically impacts the they get to write off the animals, absolutely. They get a tax write-off for the animals, but that doesn't, when you have to kill 74 million laying hens, that doesn't change the fact that you can't get up to production for 4 or 5 months. But see, everybody talks about unions are great, unions are amazing, unions are this, and unions are that. And I say all the time, unions are crap. Unions are crap. Here's why unions are crap. Because you got a guy, right, who's using XYZ union industry to move his eggs from his egg farm to the market. And the unions have all decided that they're going to have a dollar an hour raise. So now, instead of it costing me $20 to move my truckload of eggs, it's going to take me $24 to move my truckload of eggs. Well, who does that hurt? That hurts me as the egg farmer. So what do? I raise my prices. I raise my prices because a group of people that were already making a good wage decided greedily they wanted more money. And so I raise the cost of my eggs, which means Walmart raises the price of their eggs, not in order to give their workers a living wage, but they have to offset the profit margins. See, the problem is everybody talks about Walmart should let its workers unionize. Sure, Walmart should let its workers unionize. I agree with you. They shouldn't be told they can't unionize. If they want to unionize, they should be able to unionize. But what would happen to Walmart's if all the Walmart workers unionized? Walmart would go out of business because Walmart would no longer be the cheapest alternative. If you think about it, you don't go to Walmart because the people of Walmart are amazing social specimens. You go to Walmart for the price. What's hurting Walmart right now? Amazon? Because why should I bother going to deal with Walmart when I can place an Amazon pantry order and I can get all of my dry goods, canned goods, packaged stuff, delivered to my door? Unions are great. As a lineman, when we got sent north, we weren't allowed to touch anything, but we still got paid the wages of the workers. Right. That's not great. That's great for you. That's great for you. That's not great for the system. That what you just said to, oh, you're making fun of them? Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's my problem. See, great for you getting paid. What? Right? Great getting paid. But then it creates the problem because if you got paid, then somebody paid you, so somebody raised their prices and it hurt everybody else. You love the fact you're in Nova Scotia. I wanted a rack of 36 eggs. I would jump in my car 10 minutes down the road, talk to Farmer John, and buy them right from him. I even got a discount if I went out and picked them in his coops. I'm not picking chicken eggs. I'm not getting the eggs, but you know, that's fine. You do you. But yeah, it was awful watching others work and I'm not allowed to help them. Right. And see, my problem is people are like, if Jay's against unions, Jay's against workers' rights. No, I'm not. I'm not against workers' rights. I'm not against the living wage. What I'm against is a national living wage. I'm against a national living wage because there is no number you can pick that works everywhere. And you notice that the national wage debate isn't even happening anymore. We've moved past the living wage discussion. We're on spy balloons, Ukraine. COVID's gone, so living wage is gone. Workers, non-union guys, 10 guys on a crew, 10 guys working. A worker, non-union, 10 guys on a crew, 10 guys working. A union crew, 3 guys working hard, the rest watching. Yeah. See, my big point is simply this. I'm all for the workers having living wage. You guys know that I advise a lot of business owners. No, not a lot, a handful of business owners. And like I told you, a buddy of mine owns a restaurant. Been working with him. He's now He's now doing what he should be doing as a restaurant owner. He's finishing up the plans and policies to get the new place open. The new lunch early dinner place is going to be open soon. And then he's already looking at what he's going to do after that. Yeah, and raising wages to account for inflation only solidifies that inflation. Exactly. In fact, as I've tried to explain to people many, many times, and they don't want to listen, it's the accordion effect. You raise wages, prices go up, so you need to raise wages so prices can go up. Is that the PGN Food Emporium? No, I was gonna open a sushi place, but the owner decided to do some weird move, and he's doing really well with his move. I believe that some jobs should switch to a paid by the job policy. I think that a lot of jobs should switch to a paid by the job policy. But there's a problem with paid by the job. There's a problem with paid by the job. I do a paid by the job CPI service. If you want a full process map of your business done, a full process map, it's $10,000. It's $10,000. I've had people ask me what my hourly rate is. I said, why do you want to know my hourly rate? And they said, well, I want to know what I'm getting for that $10,000. I said, what you're getting for that $10,000 is 120 hours of me on site and 120 hours of me working from home. At the end of the $10,000, at the end of the 6 weeks, you're going to get a binder with your process map in it and a preliminary discussion of all your weaknesses. If you want me to then come in and do RIEs, rapid improvement events, or root problem analysis, or JDIs, just do it's, I'll do that. But those each have their own fixed controlled rate. And so I've had people say to me, well, why won't you just tell me your hourly rate? And I said, well, why does my hourly rate matter? I said, because if I tell you my hourly rate, then you're going to think that you're overpaying for the 10,000. But what is it you want? Is it you want the quality of the work? What if I have to spend more hours? Then who pays for those hours? I said, because it shouldn't be hard for you to figure out if it's $10,000 and it's 240 hours, you figure out it's $41 and change. Yeah, but our time is up, but you're only halfway through. Yep. Yeah, our time is up, but you're only halfway through. It's like I told you, one of the events that I did, I signed a contract with them, and I said, I showed up on Monday, and they said, we're not, due to some situations, we're not able to start working with you until Wednesday. I said, well, unfortunately, that's not what the contract states, so I'll be right here in the lobby. I sat there in the lobby for 8 hours. Well, I sat there for 4 hours, went and got lunch, came back, sat in the lobby, left. Next day I came in, they kind of looked at me oddly. They're like, we told you we're not meeting until tomorrow. I said, yeah, but the contract says I'm on site today. So on Wednesday when I met with them, I said, I just want to let you know, you have to make a decision call here. You either need to pay me 2 extra days at this rate, or we're going to have a really jacked up process mapping, and I'm going to have to do 5 days of work in 3 days. And they said, well, we told you that we couldn't move. I said, and that's fine, but the contract is the contract. I didn't agree to move the dates. My contract says I'm on site. So you're going to lose 2 days of on-site time, or you're going to have to pay me. And they're like, well, what's that going to cost us? I said, well, based on my calendar, that's going to cost you about $65 an hour. And they say, but your hourly rate's 41. I said, my hourly rate's not 41. Because I've never told you my hourly rate. I've told you my job rate. Everybody should work by the job. The best part of non-union work was pay incentives for hitting certain peace plateaus. When I was in the union, I was getting paid like $37 an hour. When I started working non-union, I was making $100 an hour with peace premium. Yep. But in the union, I had rules where I could only do so much work per day. Unwritten, but heavily enforced. When I was non-union, I was my own boss, and I could work as fast or as slow as I wanted. Right, and that's, that's why I'm against unions. I'm for all of the good things that come with unions. Workers' rights. None of this nonsense where they work you 30 hours, 30 hours, 39 hours, 30 hours, 30 hours, 39 hours, so that you never have the average needed to be a full-time worker. But see, where I'm against some things is people are upset that they have to have 3 jobs. Well, you're upset that you have to have 3 jobs because if they give you more than 20 hours in a week, you're trying to get benefits from them. And so, as I always say, when the government comes in with heavy-handed rules, the heavy-handed rules will never get to the maximum. The heavy-handed rules will only ever enforce the minimums. So, you tell me that the minimum wage is $15 an hour. Guess what I'm going to pay you? $15 an hour. Because why would I pay you more? Why would I pay you more? I absolutely wouldn't. I will be right back. It's like big thing right now, California. California now has it where on the job postings, you have to put, without any confusion, any uncertainty, you have to put the salary range on a job. But I've noticed a lot of these jobs got around it by saying $60,000 to $200,000 a year, right? So what you're doing is you're doing nonsense that gets around the job. But the good thing is, and where I support posting the salary on job applications or job offers, is that you can't have you can't have anything. You can't offer them below what's the bottom of your salary range. Is my stocking still up? Oh, I'll get that down. So I'm all for that. I'm all for saying I'm going to pay you between $66,000 and $200,000 a year. But what does California think that solves? People are going to be like, well, I think I'm worth 75. Well, then why did you apply for a job that said the minimum wage is 66? The minimum salary is 66. And then why is it that people are blaming businesses for lowballing them? You're working in capitalism. You're working in capitalism. So why are you surprised about capitalism? If you know what you're worth, then go out and get what you're worth. Salary range, $1 to $1 million. There, we met the requirements. We met the regulation. Well, right, you just simply put salary, the bottom is minimum wage and the top is whatever. You should always ask for 50% more than what you want because of negotiation. No, that's not a good hard and fast rule, believe it or not. Because if you ask for 50% more than what you want, you may price yourself out of competition. You got to ask. You got to do research on your job, and it's like I tell people when I help them, because I help tons of people with their budgets. But the first thing is why are you going to a job interview without knowing what you need and what you want, and those numbers aren't the same, right? So what you do is you take everything that you need to live on. You take your rent, your food, your electric, your utilities, your health insurance payment, your phone payment, your car payment. You add up all that stuff. And that column is the need column. And I mean, you really need to scrub that column to make sure that wants aren't in the need column. I catch people doing this all the time. I say, put everything in your need column. And as I go down the list, I come up with, wait, that's Hulu. That goes in the want column. That's Netflix. That goes in the want column. That $75 a month for a smartphone, right? That goes in the want column. People always get shocked at me. What do you mean? You don't need a smartphone. You need a phone. You need a phone. You need a thing that goes ring, ring. You need a thing that can get text messages. You don't need a $1,300 smartphone. So you do your needs. Then you put that little bit of extra for the phone in the wants column. But you take your needs column, right? Your needs column is $900. If your needs column is $900, then your wants column can't be any more than $900. And then your third column, your savings column, needs to be $1,200. And because you should be saving 4 out of every $10 you make. So you take 900 plus 900 plus 1,200. That gives you $3,000. That gives you should be making $3,000 a month, right? And you divide that by 160. So that means if your needs column ranks up to $900 a month, then you should be making $1,875 a month, right? You should be making $1,875 an hour. You should be making $1,875 an hour. And then people always tell me, well, I don't need to make that. Yeah, after taxes. At $1,875 after taxes. And when people say to me, they're like, well, I can't make that. I say, well, then we have a problem because your needs column is too high. And they say, well, I don't need to save $1,200 a month. I say, you don't even know what you need to do. You're broke. You're broke as a joke all the time. How do you know what you need to be saving a month? And then they look at me and they're like, okay, let's go through this again. I know people that own a house and don't have 10% of the value of the house in an account for the oh no emergencies. What? Do furnaces last forever? Do water heaters last forever? Do appliances last forever? You have a $200,000 house. I want to be lazy. You have a $200,000 house. Soon as your house is paid off, you don't start spending that mortgage money until you have a bank account with $20,000 in it. That need column, I need to pay my mortgage. All right, you've paid off your mortgage. Now I need to save 10% of the value of the building in an emergency fund. And that's not going under the savings column. That goes under the needs column. Because once you have that $20,000, that stays there. Now you can put it in a money market account. You can be slow rolling it and hopscotching it through CDs if you want to make a little bit of extra. But people are like, oh no, that's savings. Oh no, that's operational cost. Now I've been incredibly lucky. My house hasn't needed anything in the 6 years I've been here. Knock on wood. But my house hasn't needed anything. But I have that account. But it's really hard. See, and Jay, why do you always end up in the savings? Why do you always end up with the money management? Because everything's connected. You got people running around talking about a living wage, and I say to them, you don't even know. You're saying we need a living wage, but you can't tell me what a living wage looks like. I just did a mock-up number, and I said your needs were only $900 a month. Where are your needs only going to be $900 a month? Where are your needs going to be $900? They're not. Even in my small podunk town, the needs column is closer to about $1,100. But then when I say you can live on that, you can live on that. It's not a very good life, but you're also not saving anything. People we're talking about Chinese buildup in the Middle East. Well, American companies don't know how to be fair. American companies don't know how to not be greedy. The video game that I cover, Ashes of Creation, I have a mathematical plan where they could make $200 million over the course of 4 years. Without a doubt. Zero doubt. In fact, based on the information they've shared with us, I'm almost more confident that they would make more than that. So my response is, if you have the ability as a company to make $200 million over 4 years, even if you don't want that profit, why not make that profit and give it to your employees? How do you think Sweet Tart, Zetrix, Delaron, and all my composers would respond with if I got told, hey, I want to buy the Gold Master of Embers in the Wind? I say, okay, how much are you going to give me for it? I want to give you $10 million for Embers in the Wind, just Embers in the Wind. And the people that work for me or work with me would probably say, you had the opportunity to sell one song for $10 million and you didn't take it. Think about how much we would do with $10 million. Sell one song, sell the original of one song and make $10 million. Justin Bieber just did that. Yeah, he sold all of his masters. Why? Because he knows he's never going to get as popular as he was. You had to hire an accountant to manage your money. I don't have a ton, about $250,000 in investments, but I like to move it around to maximize its potential earnings. I thought about real estate, but right now it's too risky. You didn't hire an accountant, then you hired an investment manager. And if you hired an accountant to be doing investments, you hired the wrong guy. But if you've got $250,000, it should be sitting in a money market account. Oh, it's his firm. He does both. $250,000 should be sitting in a money market account. If you need the money, if you don't need the money, then $250,000 should be broken into 5, and it should be on hopscotching CDs. That way, you're never more than 90 days from getting access to $50,000. So it's pretty much what you're doing. Yeah, it's pretty much what you're doing because it's pretty much the safest play. What you do is if you have a stockpile of money that you're not going to need to touch, but you might need to touch it, then if you had $250,000, you divide it in 5: a 3-month CD, a 6-month CD, a 9-month CD, a 1-year CD, and a 15-month CD. And then it just cycles. And then what you do is you pretend that money doesn't exist, and then you start looking at your savings account, and you say, hey, my savings isn't 40% of my value again. You're constantly depleting your savings down to 0, putting it into investments, and then treating it as if your savings budget is empty. You can get access to $50,000 in 72 hours if I need it. Yeah, I can take a loan. Remember, I told you guys the best position you can ever be in is where you can leverage debt. CD, certificate of deposit. You can't access the money until the end of the term unless you break the CD, and then they don't have to pay you any of the interest. They give you a higher than a savings account bearing interest, but you lose liquidity for the term of the CD, which is why you don't take the $250,000 and put it all in one CD for 15 months. You take the $50,000, you take $250,000, you break it into 5 $50,000 chunks, because $50,000 normally will give you the highest rate. Not always, but $50,000 is usually a pretty solid rate. But the other thing you can do when you start to have that kind of money locked up into CDs is you don't have to break the CD. Once you have that kind of collateral or assets with a bank, the bank is usually more than happy to give you a loan against the CD, so you can still get your interest, and they don't mind doing that because, number one, they keep you as a customer, and number two, you're going to pay them just a little bit of interest on the debt, and they're okay with that. Also, remember, debt isn't taxed, and debt is a write-off. So whatever interest you pay in debt, you can, with creative accounting, 1-for-1 leverage against any interest you make, and you make the profits go away. The real quick version of it is, say you've got say you have $10,000 a month you can invest for the next 12 months. You get a $120,000 loan from the bank on January 1st, and you put that into an interest-bearing account at, say, 7%. and then you're only paying 4% on the loan. Well, every month you have this stream of $10,000 you can pay off 1/12 of the loan, which means every month the interest that you're paying on the loan is going to go down, it's going to go down, it's going to go down, it's going to go down. Well, when you take 120,000 and you take 7% of that, you're going to make 8,400 on the year. But when you take 120,000 and you say 4% interest, that's going to be 4,800. So when you take away the 8,400, you just made $3,600 in interest by borrowing money in January and paying it back. But the interesting thing is I said 4,800, but it's not going to be 4,800 because in the first month you pay 1/12 of the loan. In the second month you pay 1/11 of the loan. In the third month you pay 1/10 of the loan, and it keeps chopping down and chopping down and chopping down. So you really end up paying closer to about 3,500 in interest, which means you make about $5,000 by taking a loan. But that requires one really big thing, a continuous income stream to make the 1/12 payments. You're always paying more at the beginning of the loan. Yes. It's also why I tell people on their mortgages, if your mortgage is $600 a month and you're paying $600 a month on your mortgage, you're failing. You are absolutely failing. If your mortgage is $600 a month, you should be paying $700 on your mortgage a month. Because mortgages specifically have the interest front loaded. That extra $100 you put on the check, additional payment to be applied to interest. No, not that. Absolutely not that. Additional payment to be applied to principal. You should be doing that more to pay that off specifically for that first part of your mortgage. Oh yeah, if you have a mortgage, 9 times out of 10, if you have a mortgage, you're not making more in investments than you are in your mortgages. People contact me all the time and they're like, Jay, I can't imagine a mortgage that's only $600. Well, there's a mortgage that's $600. One of the properties I own, the mortgage is $600 a month. Well, not that I own. One of the properties that I'm involved in, the mortgage is only $600 a month. Because remember, there's houses that are $80,000, $70,000 a year or in value. Does that also apply to car loans? I thought the interest worked differently on those. Car loans are different. Car loans are different than mortgages. That is correct. Car loans, you only pay the usage. So you pay interest based on how long you've used their money. However, it also behooves you to, if your interest rate on your car loan is 4%, it's probably better that you just pay down the car loan as much as you can every month, because you're probably not going to make more than 4% on small amounts of money, no matter how hard you work. So, and that's why I tell people, best scene you can ever watch about being financially independent is Ben Affleck in Boiler Room. So you'd want to pay more early on, but the minimum later on. No, you want to pay more always. You want to pay more. You don't want to be under debt. You don't want to be in debt for money that you're not leveraging. Car loan is debt that you're not leveraging. Mortgage is a loan you're not leveraging. Second mortgage or refinancing your home is, a lot of people will say, well, take the equity out of your home. No, don't do that. I disagree. Your home is your base. Your home is your base. You don't mess with your base. At the end of the day, you can totally screw up and you can't lose your home. Your home should be debt-free, free and clear as soon as you can. Period. Depends on the loan. Stay away from loans. Yeah. The other thing you have to do is stay away from loans that have a prepayment penalty, essentially installment loans that lock the interest in to create the payments. Right. That is the talking point. You always have to make sure before you ever take any loan, is there a prepayment penalty? Is there a prepayment penalty? If there is, don't take that loan. Doesn't matter what it's for. Well, I'm trying to buy a car. Well, go to your bank. Go to your bank and tell your bank you want to buy a car. If your bank is always going to give you a more advantageous loan than the car dealership. In fact, what I recommend everybody do is talk to your bank about getting a car loan, but then tell the bank you're going to finance the loan. You're going to finance the car through their loan system. And then as soon as you have possession of the car, you're going to take a loan from them to pay off the loan. And then you're going to basically refinance your vehicle using a bank loan. It's assuming that the fees and everything isn't excessive, right? You can end up getting the car dealership to drop the price of the car because you're using their financing, and then you use your bank's financing, and boom, presto, you've saved yourself a bunch of money. Yeah, take a $7,000 loan out of your house to pay a car loan if the interest is more advantageous. But at the same time, what you're doing is then, okay, now I own my car, and now I'm going to put $7,000 back into my house as fast as possible so I own my house again. The bank would do that because it's in their best interest. They get the money for the initial financing, and then they get the second loan, so they win both ways. Right, exactly. Well, not exactly, because the bank won't necessarily be the initial financer. Isn't the saying, if you can get more from your cash elsewhere than the interest, then don't pay more? Yes, but here's the thing. You're not going anymore. You're not going to be getting money from your money elsewhere. If you owe 5% on your mortgage, but you're making 12% in the stock market, then that's a no-brainer. Take the extra 12% or take the extra 7% and run with it. But that's old adage stuff from the 70s. That's Reagan economics that boomers are still holding on to. In the 70s, in the 80s, they wanted you to be in debt up to your eyeballs because debt is what makes the economy go round. Debt is what makes if everybody was suddenly out of debt in this country, the economy would fall apart. You don't make spit from any money sitting in your bank. In a savings account, that is correct. In a savings account, absolutely. I make a couple of 3-4% points on a money market account right now, but I got a lot of money in there. So leaving your money sitting in the bank is making money you are losing. Yeah, if you like, I find people that have money market accounts are different, but they're still in your bank, and you treat them like a savings account. You can only withdraw from it 6 times a month, and then you get the average rolling balance. But I find people that are sitting around with $30,000 in their checking account. Your checking account is probably making you less than half a point. Even if you opened a basic savings account, you would make more. I've run into people that have $100,000 in a checking account, and then they're struggling to get anywhere. And I'm like, but you're sitting on $100,000. They're paying 9% on a loan. And they're like, well, my dad always taught me to keep $100,000 in the bank. Yet now when you're paying 9% to a credit card on $7,000, wipe that shit. Wipe that out. And then you pay yourself back the monthly payment. But see, that's where people don't have discipline. If you can guarantee the rate, you can do that. Instead of paying your house at $300,000 at 3.2, you could get a U.S. Treasury at 4, both guaranteed returns. Yeah, and the thing is though, and this is where the really, really, really big part comes in. I don't think 3/4 of a point is necessarily worth dicking around with. Because as long as you have that mortgage, your ability to leverage other debt is impacted. But for a lot of people, yeah, 3/4 of a point, let's just call it a point. That's $3,000 a year then. That's $3,000 extra a year. So yeah, I definitely agree. It takes discipline not to spend. That's the problem. Your balance is 0 at the end of paying all your bills and your checking. I leave like $1,000 in my checking account. I leave like $1,000 in my checking account just for the simple fact of, number one, it's $1,000, and you have 5K overdraft. Yeah, I leave $1,000 in my checking account just because it makes the bank happy, and happy bank allows me to go in there and do happy things. What's the best thing a person can do with debt in collections? Great question. Fight all of that debt. Fight all of that debt. Fight all of it. Send them all the Jahlon screw off letter. If you need me to post that, I can post it on my Discord later today. I think it's on my Discord somewhere. But I have a debt collector letter, if you're an American, that you can send. And a lot of times they end up just wiping the debt because it becomes, they don't want to get fined, and they know you're a person that knows how to play the game. So they wipe the debt because they'll take that debt as a loss because they don't want to get, they know that you know how the game is played. They don't want to run into a scenario where you are just going to crush them and they're going to have to pay you. Also, debt collectors are scumbags. Debt collectors are absolutely scumbags because they break the law left, right, and center all the time. In my opinion, debt collection is indicative of a society that isn't teaching people properly. If you have a percentage-based portion of your economy being people that are collecting on other people's debt, you have got to ask yourself, where did your society go so wrong? Like, for example, you guys know that I don't take anybody's bullshit because I don't have to. I'm not tired at the end of the day looking at a collections notice or a doctor's bill or anything. I'm the guy that's at 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm up calling everybody. As you guys know, my daughter lacerated her liver last September. She fell out of the hammock and she lacerated her liver. She went to one hospital. She went to another hospital. She was admitted into the hospital. All these bills were accumulating. They started sending stuff to my insurance. My insurance was denying the claims, and they were saying, we need you. TRICARE was telling the hospital, we need you to talk to the patient. You need to send the patient this form. The patient needs to send us this form. This is completely stupid. This is a completely stupid thing. It is the year 2023, and I still had to fax a form in. There is no reason why, if they needed a DD form 2527, that they couldn't have me go online, fill in a 2527, hit submit, hit digitally sign, send it in, and then immediately attach that to the claim. I filled out that form 3 times. I filled out that form 3 times. And then I had one of the hospitals say that if I didn't pay my balance, they were going to send it to collections. And I called them and I said, if you send this to collections, I will bring down the full weight of every organization that stops you from doing that. And they said, well, your balance is due. I said, my balance isn't due. There is a problem between your office and their office, and you're fraudulently charging my insurance a number that they don't understand. And the hospital was like, well, we're TRICARE contracted, so we reduced the bill to what they should pay. I said, but they said to me, you're not supposed to do that. That's something you're doing to expedite you getting paid. And they said, well, yes, we're expediting us to get paid. I said, so you expedited a form for you to get paid. It shows up as a mismatch. TRICARE rejected it to you, not for patient responsibility, but for your own shenanigans. And now you're trying to say that the reason it got kicked was my responsibility, but it's really your responsibility, and you're threatening to send it to collections. And at that point, the woman was like, well, you have an obligation to pay your bill because this is 4 months old. And I said, Are you telling me your hospital's going to shut down if I don't pay you an $11,000 bill from 4 months ago? Yes. Okay. I'm going to need your boss's name and just let your boss know to have their boss's name ready to go. I got the boss. And the boss was like, I am so sorry, but the person that we just hired is... I said, I don't really care about what your personnel problems are. Are you sending this to collections or not? No, we're not sending this to collections. Oh, good. And the person's like, why is that? I was like, because I really want to sue you. Then I got the like, well, what can we do to help? Oh, you can send TRICARE the bill with the dollar amount they're expecting, not the dollar amount that you're streamlining. Because what they did is it was like a $45,000 bill, but that they would send a bill for $45,000 to other insurance companies, but because it's TRICARE, they know TRICARE is only going to pay $11,000. By the way, I'm just going to talk real quick about insurance. Chris Rock had an amazing comedy skit back in the 90s, and he said insurances should be renamed in case shit. In case shit happens, you got some coverage. I want to remind you that the value of insurance is not the fact that they pay 30%, 60%, 80%. The value of insurance is the contracted rate. I want to let you know that there's 19 people in the room. And if we all had 19 different insurances and we all went to the same doctor, we would pay 19 different rates. Because my insurance negotiates a physical rate at $30 and yours does $50 and another one does $22 and another one does $37. That's again, where I talk about profit taking. That's where we have a huge problem. We have a huge problem in every industry, in every facet of our lives, because everybody is about profit taking. What is a physical worth? Is a physical worth $80? Is insurance worth $30? Or is a physical worth $30? Is it worth $51? Because every insurance company should be paying the same, because every person should be paying the same. Remember we did a video on fair and equal. Insurance and medical treatment is something that should be equal. Objectively, empirically equal. So if a physical is $80, then everybody should be paying $80. And every insurance company should be paying $80. A heart transplant for me and you should be the exact same cost. You're right. But now, Flame Strike, what you have to understand, though, is a heart transplant for me and you should be the exact same cost. Except I'm not saying the healthcare should be affordable. I'm saying that, unfortunately, the first step in fixing the problem is we got to get everybody, we got to make it equal. And then we have to make it fair. I go to the doctor. Let me take that back. I call my doctor and I can't get an appointment that day. So I can go, I can ask my doctor for a same day rejection letter. Hey, I'm sick. I need to be seen. They're like, we don't have any acute appointments. I need a rejection letter. Why? Because I reserve the right to utilize either the ER or the urgent care. Now, my doctor's office has an agreement with TRICARE to have X number of same-day acute appointments. Sometimes they just don't want to fill them. Sometimes the doctor doesn't. Sometimes the doctor walks in and says, I really don't want any acutes today. I don't want runny noses today. Well, when I ask for that rejection letter, my doctor's office has to prove to TRICARE that they had no same-day appointment letter, or same-day acutes. They got to pay for the emergency room. They have to authorize the emergency room. And it's a whole, TRICARE, man. It's TRICARE is the whole TRICARE thing. But I reserve the right to go to the acute center because I don't want to sit in the emergency room for 3 hours. So I go to the acute center, but TRICARE then pays for it because I hand the acute center this letter and I say, here you go, you can bill TRICARE full rate. The problem is why am I on a day that I'm sick with a pounding headache and colored snot coming out of my nose, and why am I having to go through and do paperwork? Why isn't it simply you don't have more patients on your impanelment than you can handle? Case in point, more stupidity. My wife has medical problems. She sees a number of specialists. One of her specialists has left the hospital. The hospital sent my wife a letter that said, you need to go to your primary care provider and get a referral and then find a new specialist off this list. Why? Why doesn't the new doctor coming to the practice, why doesn't the replacement doctor just pick up the original doctor's empanelment? So there should be zero paperwork. It should be scan my card, I'm done. If you want forms filled out, let the doctor do the visit. Fill in. Yeah, exactly. See, this is where I'm so disenfranchised with every single thing that we do. Our planet does nothing well. Our planet, and then I hear Europeans say to Americans, well, our healthcare system is better. No, it's not. Your healthcare system is different. Canada, people from Canada always say our healthcare system is amazing. And then you see the news where the guy's wife died in the emergency room because she couldn't get treatment. She literally died in the emergency room, waiting to be treated. For those of you that don't know this, America has some of the best medical care in the world. Rich people from other countries come to America to get surgeries and they pay cash. Filthy, loaded people come to America to have certain surgeries and they pay cash for it because they can't get that quality of care in their country. Do I think that there should be doctors allowed to provide private health care at a premium to the rich and famous? Yes, I do. But do I think that if poor Flame Strike needs to go to the emergency room, Flame Strike should be able to go to the emergency room and not have to pay $1? Yes, I do. The problem is you'll never get people. The moment you say free healthcare, people are like, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, remember I said, if the government was running certain things like a business, mainly oil, fuel, hydropower, air power, turbines, right? If the government was managing all of that, the government would have so much money, they'd be like, oh, Flame Strike needs to see the doctor. The government pays it. Canada healthcare is good, but as a normal person, you can't jump the queue. If you are rich, we have a 3-tier healthcare here. Yeah, exactly. And then I want to tell you the truth about Canadian healthcare for the rich. They come to America. Because as Grumpy Old Man said, in paying cash, you get a better rate since they don't have to deal with the paperwork. Exactly. That doctor knows he's getting paid cash money, cold hard cash. He's going to be like, oh, what do you need? You need your gallbladder removed? Oh, well, that's going to be $400,000 cash. And the guy just shows up with a bag of money. Here, this doesn't really show up with a bag of money, but he shows up with a bag of money, and there's the doctor like, okay, here's my cut, here's the hospital's cut, here's the nurse's cut. Everybody gets a cut today. I don't see a problem with that. I think if we fixed medicine for profit, more people would be able to get what they need. It's like, you ever go to an appointment and then get told you have to go to another appointment? And you're like, why do I have to go to another appointment? You ever been at your doctor's office and be like, yeah, I need my immunizations. And they're like, unfortunately, we're not doing immunizations today. So you have to come back another time. I have to come back another time to get an immunization because you want to charge me for another visit. Because if I get an immunization, while I'm already at the doctor's office, they don't get a visit fee. They get an extra service fee. Do they pocket those cuts, or do they have to wait when the paychecks come in? No, the only people that get paid is the hospital. And then it depends on how they set it up. The doctor gets a bonus, the staff gets a bonus for a cash patient. Or sometimes it's just the hospital makes the money. The doctor's on staff. Is the doctor a contracted doctor to the hospital, or is the doctor running a private practice out of the hospital? You know, a lot of surgeons have moved out of hospitals, and we now have this thing called private surgery suites, where the doctor pays a premium to a company that that provides an environment for them to perform surgeries. When my daughter had her tonsils taken out, they said she was going to be in a private surgical suite. And so they got a little concerned because my wife and I were both medical. And my wife said, okay, got a question for you. They said, what's that? I said, what's your code blue procedure? And they kind of, what? Walk me through how a code blue works in this surgery center. And they told me. I said, okay, what happens at the 4-minute mark? How far is it to the nearest trauma center? And they said, well, it's about 3 minutes by ambulance. I said, so as soon as a code blue happens, you call the ambulance? They said, yes. I said, I can live with that. I can live with that. I said, if you have a code blue in the surgical suite, you're going to be in the trauma center in about 7-8 minutes. I'm okay with that. I can live with that. I can live with that. There's these surgical suites, I find out, they're like 40 minutes away from the nearest trauma center. I'm like, no, you're not the surgeon for us. We'll do our surgery in a hospital, thanks. Why? Because you're not a trauma surgeon. You're not an oh shit guy. You're not a we can make this happen guy. Depends on the hospital setup. Your son just had his surgery at an anesthesiologist, and the hospital were different bills than the doctor. Yeah. Your doc, that's your side hustle guy. Yeah, that's your side hustle guy right there. Your doc pushes the flu shots and other shots when I'm already there. It's 100% profit for them. They can double charge healthcare for the visit. Yeah, this is another one that pisses me off about healthcare as I close up today's show. My daughter a couple of years ago, she got bitten by something on her inner thigh. And it was a pretty sizable cyst was forming. My wife took our daughter to the children's hospital. There's 2 hospitals within 15 minutes of us. The one that we always go to and the one with the children's trauma center. That the only time we go to Memorial is for the children's trauma center. The rest of the time we go to the other hospital. Well, my daughter got there and the doctor, the resident on staff at night wasn't qualified to lance the cyst. Which my wife turned around and said, you're the doctor on shift, and nobody in either of the ERs is qualified to do this. And he said, well, I'm not. And my wife, who was a med tech supervising doctors' residencies for the military, turned around and said, well, then you shouldn't be working alone. And I'm going to talk to the chief of medicine tomorrow about this because this is wholly unacceptable. Then you shouldn't be open. And my wife did follow up, and the chief of medicine at Memorial was like, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I had no idea we had unqualified residents with no teacher on shift. Now, ironically, the hospital across the street is a teaching hospital. So we followed up on that one. So my wife takes our daughter to St. Louis Children's Hospital. She got there at 11:10. And we got billed for the check-in at 11:10. They didn't see my daughter until 12:02. So they could bill us for a second day in the ER. I don't care if you want to lie on the paperwork. If you want to look at me and wink, wink, nudge, nudge, then I'll be like, sure, put whatever times you want down. But don't make my little girl sit there for 52 minutes miserable because you want to hit the next billable day. And then I got involved in that one, and they were like, well, sir, you have to understand you were here for 52 minutes. And I said, there was nobody else in the ER. It was one of those rare spooky occurrences where there was nobody else in the ER. I said, there was nobody else in the ER. And then they were like, well, sometimes the doctors have other things to do. Please tell me that your ER doctor does normal floor rounds. Please tell me that. And they were like, no. So then where was your ER doctor for 52 minutes? My healthcare provider and my insurance agency are the same entity. The doctors are employed by the people who pay the bill, so I know they're not getting shafted. Yeah. The person company billing you is different from the person company you bought from. Don't mean to derail, but I have credit card debts in collections from a retail store. If the person company billing you is different from the person company you bought from, yes. So say it was JCPenney card and they sold the debt to someone else to collect. Yes. I can post as soon as I'm on my other account, because this is its own Windows account. As soon as I'm on my other account, just ping me in Discord and I can post the letter. It's called the J fuck you debt collector letter. It makes them jump through like 75 hoops. Now, the truth of the matter is, if you have debt in collections, what I am going to tell you is the letter is only going to help you not get screwed by the debt collector. Debt in collections is still your responsibility. But one of the things you should never do on debt and collections is make a single payment on it. The moment you ever make a payment on debt and collections, you acknowledged and legitimized the debt. Anyway, nice to see the little politics channel growing a little bit, having people coming out. Thanks for coming out today. I do this show every Saturday. So usually we take a topic at hand. Today I didn't know what I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to talk about news, and it led us down the rabbit hole. Every so often I gotta let the rabbits run free and just go where they may. I will be back next Saturday on this show to talk about Audit the Auditors. I usually don't like to show other people's content, but I want to pull some audits from First Amendment auditors and some Audit the Auditors, because I want to talk about why some of these people need to be taken out back and shot, because all they're doing is antagonizing police officers, while at the same time, some of them are doing amazing work, and they are really showing the police officers that are tyrants. With that said, I may stream later today on my gaming channel for Final Fantasy. I may not. It all depends on how the day works out. I will see you guys next week.